right, welcome to this special edition of PSTEC webinars, and we've put this together with the most recent release or launch of one of Tim's, I think, most wonderful releases in a lot of ways, and releases, and no pun intended, but this is about releasing things as well. And this is called PSTEC Negative, the Belief Eraser. And I have with me, of course, Tim Frizzackerly, the creator and founder of PSTEC. How you doing, Tim?
Hi, Jeff. I'm fine, thank you. A bit tired, but so if there's any yawning, I apologize. Other than that, I'm all right.
Okay. And I also have with us one of our master practitioners, Peter Owen, from themindhealer.co.uk. Peter's also the author of PSTEC in the Trenches and also did the majority of the work on PSTEC Advanced 2. Peter, great to have you with us, too. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
I brought Peter and Tim together on this because we wanted to also have a little discussion on some of the, not only we're going to go through the benefits and the aspects of this new package, but also we're going to talk about some initial questions that have come up, so we'll cover some of those. And we'll also give you, toward the end here, a hint of where you can get this and also other ways to get your questions answered as you get that package. And if questions come up, we'll have some support for that as well. So we'll have everything bundled up for you nice and tight and support you on this as you move into this journey with this new package from PSTEC. So without further ado, let me get into this. In this video, we're also presenting some information for those that are not familiar yet with PSTEC. So those that are familiar with it, bear with us. And if you are familiar, don't tune out or fast forward. What I want you to do is listen to this because we're going to emphasize some aspects of PSTEC that are expanding on some answers to questions that are quite common. So you may have had some of these questions come up in your own mind, and we're going to help you define some aspects as well to make your PSTEC work that much more effective. PSTEC Negative is a tool unlike any of the others that you've seen if you're familiar with PSTEC. You can use it for self-help, self-development, and also empowerment. And the purpose is to allow you to remove any and all unwanted programming, whether consciously remembered or not. Now the question is, remove what? And PSTEC Negative is about removing old programming, removing unwanted beliefs, removing negative beliefs, removing limiting beliefs. You can use PSTEC Negative to strip those things out at their very root. I think this is a great aspect here, Tim, and you and I have talked about this because quite often we'll have a real root belief, and we have other beliefs that kind of spin off of it, if you will, maybe sub-beliefs if you want to call that.
Yeah.
And I think there's two aspects here, not only getting to the root of the sub ones maybe, but even to the root of the main foundational one. Go ahead, sorry.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I see a sort of tree structure where you've got like a core belief, which might be really problematic, sitting in the middle, and then other beliefs which are branched off it. Talking about stripping things out at their root is like, tree analogy is probably not very good in that regard, but it's like chopping it off where it meets the ground instead of pruning it back by the sort of little branches and boughs that come off the main trunk. So that's really the thinking behind this, is that it's about taking out as much as possible. And of course, with people are complex, so it's not necessarily straightforward. One of the most important things is to identify the beliefs that are most problematic, of course. And so that, I think, is going to be where the sort of skill and care comes in. But yeah, absolutely, it's about stripping it out at its root.
And I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people, because sometimes we have this tree and we are pruning at the top, and we do get down to the core one, and that's great. I mean, that still works, correct? Well, you can go about it that way, absolutely, right?
It does, but it's inefficient, and there is also a problem with that, which is essentially that if you leave the trunk there, the sort of core problematic belief, then it supports the other beliefs that hang off it. So if you it's a bit like pruning a tree. You prune it in the spring, and by the time you get to the autumn, it's grown back again. You don't want that. So really, you need to be targeting those core beliefs, the ones that sit and underpin everything else, if that makes sense.
In working with other people, one thing that I've noticed with core beliefs is they're a little bit more general. In other words, they can apply to a lot of different things, such as, I'm not good enough. It's kind of general and not real specific, and off of that can branch something that says, I'm always sick. Could branch off of there, or I don't have enough money, or I'm just no good in relationships. And would that be an example maybe of that tree?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, obviously, it's going to depend from one person to another. And
Sure.
like I said, for me, is where the care is required in identifying which beliefs are the ones that really cause the problems.
Okay, so there's a little preview, if you will, a little summary of what PSTEC Negative is about. But like I said in the beginning, I want to first move into some about what PSTEC is in general, for those that aren't familiar with PSTEC. PSTEC is short for Percussive Suggestion Technique, and it creates subconscious and conscious change. Does it fast, does it reliably, and it's also easy to use. So these are a suite of tools, or like I like to call them Tim's tools, for shifting your perception of the world, and thereby shifting your experience, shifting your results, shifting your behaviors, your beliefs, your emotions, all those kind of aspects, so that you can be more free in life to make more choices consciously. And I also like to call it bringing my conscious and my subconscious mind in harmony, so that we're not, fighting each other. So at the core of this are the PSTEC click tracks. These are tools that neutralize unwanted, negative, or unpleasant emotions quickly, easily, reliably. They're free to download and really powerful. They erase or lower negative emotions attached to memories, events, ideas, etc. And these, Tim, in my working with others, I use these, if you had a percentage, with most people, especially when they're first starting out, that's what I use the most, or just the basic click tracks quite often.
Yeah, I would say I'm about 50-50.
But when people first start out, when they're brand new, it's much higher.
Oh, I see what you mean. If somebody's coming to it from cold, that is the place to start, without a shadow of a doubt.
And they are free. The package is free. It has the instructions, etc. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is, to me, an essential foundational tool, if you will. And I appreciate you still giving it away for free, Tim, giving away these click tracks, because there are a lot of people that do email. They just don't seem to have the means at the moment to find solutions for some of their issues. So I know they've been really foundational in helping a lot of people get out of the muck, initially at least. Okay, so just to emphasize that, download the click tracks. Downloading those and using them is your first and most important step. Before you even use PSTEC Negative, use the click tracks and get some familiarity. And for most people, Tim, right, before they use PSTEC Negative, quite often they may have some emotional charge to that issue anyway. And we're going to talk about that in more detail. Again, don't relegate the click tracks to the bottom of the closet, Don't forget about those.
Yeah,
they're still an essential part. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that is absolutely essential. When people download PSTEC Negative, it comes with some instructions. They are there for a reason. First step for many things is still going to be the PSTEC click tracks, because it's important to clear out the sort of emotional side of things first, if you're going to attempt to remove a belief.
I've found that with a lot of people that get into PSTEC Positive, too. And that's why I think this is important to, as it says there, important to emphasize this. They'll get into PSTEC Positive and kind of just push click tracks off to the side, and they're not addressing their emotional issues that are still coming up any longer. They're just trying to deal with beliefs, and that's a good part of the puzzle, but they're missing or avoiding the emotional issues and not clearing that out, and it's causing them some issues of being efficient and being able to do this as quickly as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that often getting rid of big emotions often undoes a lot of unhelpful beliefs without even having to identify them or working them specifically. So, for example, if someone hates himself, which I get a lot of people who hate themselves, that's the very first thing I'll get rid of or get them to focus on themselves and either use the click tracks or accelerators. And often that is all that will be required to blast away a whole tree of beliefs. It can be ultra effective, so I would always start off there before getting down to the belief section. But I'll talk a bit more about how I've used it in combination with the click tracks a bit later on.
I was going to say, Jeff, that's a really good example because if somebody were to undertake to remove the belief that they hate themselves, while the feeling is still there, that belief is, even if you were successful, that belief is immediately going to be at odds with what's being experienced emotionally. And that's going to undo whatever work's been done. And that's why it's essential to begin with the click tracks. Very often, if there's any kind of emotional component attached to that belief, it's important to use the click tracks to get that down nice and low, preferably 1 or a 0, before working on the belief side at all. So the PSTEC negative is a very powerful tool, but you've got to look at it in the context of the other things around it. And again, these things, tempting, I think, for many people just to sort of rush ahead and try something. Oh, I can do this. And setting aside the fact that, they do need to deal with the emotions first. And that's why the click tracks are free. It's one of the reasons why the click tracks are free. But it's also why in the instructions for PSTEC negative, it says, look, you do need to do this first. The other thing that's really important, Jeff, is for anybody who's new to it, familiarity with the click tracks for emotions is likely to allow that person to be far more successful with things like PSTEC negative and PSTEC positive, because in terms of use, they are a little bit more challenging.
So some people, two things, I've noticed that they just want to be positive, and I think that's why they want to rush to the PSTEC positive. But again, like you're emphasizing, if I have feelings that tell me, I hate myself, or I'm angry at myself, or any of those kind of aspects, and at the same time I'm trying to tell myself that I'm wonderful, or that I love myself, and those kind of aspects, there's a conflict right there.
Yeah,
and I think the emotions are going to win, right?
Well, they do, because they're completely at odds with it. Something like a stage hypnotist would be a great example of this. Suppose they get a really great subject and they say, right, okay, from this moment you are an astronaut walking on the moon. Yeah, for a time they may have that perception, but they're not an astronaut walking on the moon, and at some stage all of the sort of sensory clues and information about the fact that that isn't the case, that's going to kick in. If you left that person, sooner or later, objective reality would replace that belief. And that's why certain things are important. That's why they need to be done in a certain order, so that you haven't got one thing contradicting the other.
Absolutely. Again, back to harmony, being in harmony. I think that's a wonderful objective for people. If you're working with this and you want to get in harmony where you're not in conflict and you have these voices in your head, maybe not literally, but you're like struggling, that's what this is about, getting that in harmony, and you need to address the emotions as well as the beliefs.
Uh-huh.
All right, so the PSTEC click tracks can be used on fears, anxieties, anger, jealousy, grief, any unwanted emotions. If they're and when Tim says negative, he's saying they're negative because they're working against you and against your desires and intentions. So they can be used on any emotion. The PSTEC click tracks are so powerful that the tracks will often clear fears and full-blown phobias in a matter of minutes, and similarly with the likes of PTSD. Very, very powerful, and again, these are foundational. So we just really wanted to emphasize this, that especially brand new people don't go running off to PSTEC negative and or PSTEC positive without becoming excellent and getting used to working with these click tracks, these free click tracks. And in the instructions for PSTEC negative, in the PDF that you'll get with the package, it'll tell you where you can get those for free and no obligation, and it's not temporary. And the click track package is not some sampler, the free basic one. It's full blown with instructions, the actual tracks, and again, even when I work with other people, I use those tracks regularly. So we wanted to also touch on PSTEC positive. This is a counterpart to PSTEC negative. And PSTEC positive is another core aspect to PSTEC. And we've talked about emotions and emphasized the use of the PSTEC click tracks. PSTEC positive allows you to deliver your own suggestions to your subconscious to affect your beliefs. It's excellent for installing and creating brand new beliefs, creating new habits, and changing behaviors. Just with those two foundational PSTEC tools, the basic click tracks and the PSTEC positive, you have incredible tools for change at your fingertips. If you're familiar with NLP, self-hypnosis, EFT, any other kind of therapy, you should find PSTEC to be even more flexible, easier to use, and most crucially, much more powerful. I mean, these are the basics that I've been using for years here with people and myself. They're foundational. These are the ones that I've been using for the most part. You know, and some other tools here and there, but these are the basic ones for me. Yeah. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, recently, as usual, I'm dealing with lots of very severe, quite suicidal people who've been through major trauma. I've been using a lot more accelerators and cascade release because of my client base. But yes, typically, that would be my core, especially with the click tracks and the EEFs, followed up by some PSTEC positives and other techniques I use. So, yeah,
I've used a lot of accelerators as well, and I kind of categorize them with these as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of an optional one, but they are a big help. And the accelerators you can use for emotions, beliefs, or behaviors, so they're kind of more multi-dimensional, so that you can go and use them on the emotions and the beliefs. So yeah, I use those quite a bit as well. I agree with you on that. So, and then just to kind of lump that in there, also there's the EEFs, which are available, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But those are also like click tracks, just a lot stronger. But those are the core ones. We're talking about tracks to affect and neutralize your emotions, and then tracks to shift and change your beliefs. It's really simple, really. Once you delve into it a bit, it becomes really simple. You feel an emotion, you pull out the basic click tracks or the EEFs or even the accelerators, like Peter's pointing out. Or if you want to change beliefs, use PSTEC positive, or again, you can use the accelerators as well. Does that sound good, Tim?
Well, it does. Yeah. If somebody's coming to this from cold, some of these names and terms might sound a bit strange. I've got to hold my hands up there and say, that's my fault. That's my fault. It doesn't actually take that long to get familiar with it. And once PSTEC is essentially modular, and there are a number of different tools which are designed to be applicable to an infinite number of problems or desired changes and so forth. And they've each got different jobs. I think that in this context, the most important ones are the click tracks for emotions, PSTEC positives for suggesting things to your subconscious and having that suggestion delivered. The other things, we're probably better off not really talking about those at this time, because it's going to be clearest, I suppose, exactly where PSTEC negative fits in if we concentrate on that. But yeah, those names might sound a bit odd. That it is my fault, but you do get the hang of it very quickly. And PSTEC is really, really simple to use, despite the strange names.
Some people that are familiar with PSTEC might say, okay, I'm dealing with emotions. I'm addressing those with like the click tracks and others, a couple other tools, but let's say the click tracks, and then PSTEC positive for beliefs and behaviors. So why PSTEC negative?
The short answer to that is that in some ways you don't need it, which is probably a strange thing to say, given that we're here to explain the benefits. It's about efficiency, and it's about doing a job as well as possible. When we get on to the purpose of PSTEC negative, I think it's going to make more sense, and we'll be able to explain exactly why there is a benefit in having a tool which allows you to do something which, to a certain extent, you could do by other means. This is a better way to go about it.
I agree. And just in my initial working with a few other people, PSTEC negative, it has made things easier, more efficient, like you said, especially with really, as we talked about on the onset, those core beliefs that are really foundational, and they've been there a long, long time and reinforced day after day or year after year. I think this does make it more efficient. Then when I come in, and we'll talk about this with PSTEC positive, which I still want to use, it just makes it so much easier. It makes so much more sense for the individual that's trying to make those shifts and changes.
Mm-hmm.
On many things, you have to make sense of contradictory information or suggestions. And to do this, your subconscious uses a series of balances. One balance exists for each belief. Let's throw an example here at everybody. Let's say we hold the belief that says, can you double your income in the next 18 months? So that's, for a lot of people, would be popular, or something that they wish to do, and they've been challenged and haven't been able to do it ever. Maybe even gone in the opposite direction. So with that question, can you double your income in the next 18 months? When that question comes up in your mind, you have a belief whether you can or can't do that. So on this slide, you'll see a scale. And on one side of the balance, you have all of the information derived from past experience, which tells you that you can't, on the left side there. So it's all the experiences that added up, all the things you were told, all the things you observed, everything that says why you can't double your income in the next 18 months. On the other side of this scale, you have all the information derived from past experience, all the emotions, all the beliefs, all the behaviors, all the experiences, the things you were told, which tells you that you can do it. All of these things are accumulated, and the scale will go one side or the other. Now, if it's nice and even like you see on that screen, you might be able to, you might not. It's kind of 50-50, right? When it says decision, it means the decision at your subconscious level. Right, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. And if your subconscious has the absolute expectation that you can't, that is going to hold you back. You're not going to make any progress, because the subconscious does everything it can in order to make your reality fit expectations.
So in a sense, the subconscious makes the decision for you, right?
Yeah, well, it sort of does, but also if you think about it, if it's saying I can't, if it has the belief that you can't, why on earth would it undertake to do anything that would move you in that direction? It doesn't make sense. It would be a waste of effort, a waste of resources. There's no point.
Yeah. And there's that disharmony that quite often we have between our consciously we go, well, I know I think I can.
Well, usually it's more I'd like to.
Yeah, right.
I'd really like to.
When your subconscious weighs this contradictory information, your belief will be one or the other, depending on the balance of the information. So that's what we've talked about. It's going to weigh the experiences, the beliefs, the emotions, the habits, all that stuff, and it's going to weigh it and go, okay, which side is heavier? For a lot of people, if emotions, beliefs, and habits weigh heavier on the I can't side, then moving forward will be difficult, if not impossible, like we just talked about, right?
Yeah, it depends how steep that balance is, but essentially, yes, and it's going to be very difficult.
And I wanted to emphasize on relationships. I've seen a lot of posts on the forum, and I've had a lot of emails from people with the relationship issues. Never seem to encounter people that are really just ideal for me. There's always contention and problems. Go out and socially, it's just not any fun for me. Same thing with health. I just can't seem to get over this health issue at all. It seems to get worse and worse and worse. And while like health issues and medical things and et cetera, consult your doctor, et cetera, and the typical disclaimer, at the very, very least, your mind model and how you perceive things help you in those efforts as you try to get healthy or feel better or, whatever the situation might be, right?
Yeah, a relationship's a really good example. I think we probably all know people who reckon that they are hopeless when it comes to relationships and they always go badly. That's very much on the I can't side. I can't find somebody who I'm compatible with. I can't have a decent relationship. It always goes wrong. With those kinds of beliefs, that they do tend to be self-fulfilling, because the subconscious mind will quite happily destroy a relationship in order to make sure that the reality fits the belief.
With PSTEC Positive, which a lot of people that are listening now have some experience with, and those that don't, what it's about, it allows you to add weight, a lot of weight, fast and efficiently to one side of a belief by adding new information in the form of suggestions. So if you have a belief that says, I can't double my income in the next 18, you begin to apply suggestions to the subconscious in the opposite direction, and you can tip that scale. And we're just talking about that belief at the moment. you can begin to tip that scale over to the right of I can.
Yeah,
Now,
and nothing's going to change until that tips, Jeff. I think that's quite an important thing to point out.
And you know what's funny, too, is I've seen people, it starts tipping and teetering, and they get some good results sometimes, but it hasn't really tipped really far to the right. They, in effect, stop paying attention to how their mind model is operating, how their mind model is working with or for them, and it's a little too soon, if you will. In other words, it's not reinforced very well yet, and then some of that old programming starts to tip them to the left a little bit. So I think it's really important to pay attention to this and maintain it at least until it's really solid. Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
So you would generally use PSTEC Positive to add a suggestion to the side of the belief balance that you can do that. A single use of PSTEC Positive is equivalent to hundreds of affirmations. So I know I know a lot of people here listening are probably familiar with affirmations and have even used them. But quite often we'll use them, but it's just not as effective. PSTEC Positive is much more effective in taking that affirmation, that suggestion, that new belief, and applying it to the subconscious.
Say, Jeff, one of the problems with affirmations is that generally when people are using them, they at the same time are telling themselves, well, I'm using this affirmation so that I will be able to do this, but at the same time, there's doubt about it. And that's one of the reasons why affirmations are generally very, very weak. The thing with PSTEC Positive is designed to bypass the doubts, essentially.
Yeah.
So that each of those suggestions hits the subconscious fully.
Great point. And what about that old programming, right? That shift to a much more positively held belief does not mean, however, that it has removed the negative or contradictory information from past experience, which is still kind of lurking on the other side of the suggestions you have been using. Your belief may have changed, but the old unwanted programming is still there, and that's what we're both alluding to here. The stuff may still be lurking in there, and either you need to pile on PSTEC Positive a bit longer, a bit more, to make sure that you can shift it over, or we have an alternative now, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just an alternative, though, is it? It's
wrong word. Yeah, you're right.
It's a little bit more than that. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this bit in red here that says your belief may have changed, but the old unwanted programming is still there. Essentially, what we're saying is you pile a ton of suggestions on the I can side with PSTEC Positive, and once you hit that tip and you change the balance, yes, you have a change in belief that your subconscious mind can then run with and express. Yeah. But the problem is the negative stuff, the I can't stuff, is still sitting there. And it might not be in the way, and it may stay tipped like that, but it carries a danger leaving it there. I think that's the best way to put this.
Yeah, I don't. Not an alternative is not what I meant, but an additional option here that can actually address the negative belief that's there. And a great example I have, and I've worked with many people that we're changing beliefs, and they in a future session, or they're saying, "Oh, I'm having some problems here with whatever I'm working on here, and I'm trying to move forward, but something in my mind still tells me maybe I can't do it." So it's still there, kind of like that angel and the devil on the shoulder. That little negative one's still there, still talking a little, and usually the prescription for that would be, okay, if that is still coming quite prominent, number one, address emotions first. If there's any emotions still there, again, address those first, and then continue doing some more PSTEC Positive, and we craft a positive statement to counteract that, and do a little bit more repetition with PSTEC Positive. But now we have another additional piece that we can add to the puzzle to make this even easier, right?
Yep, absolutely. Can I just give an example there, Jeff, of what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff was talking about adding, using PSTEC Positive more than once to pile up suggestions on the I can side of a belief. As you know, I'm a hypnotherapist, and I use hypnosis with people as well. Mm-hmm. One of the things that is very, very common when using hypnosis is to repeat a suggestion in exactly the same way that somebody would repeat an affirmation. The only thing is each suggestion carries more weight or energy or mass, if you like. But even with hypnosis and with a client in deep hypnosis, you still very often end up repeating suggestions. In fact, when I was doing smoking cessation sessions with people, I would hit them with the suggestion that they are now a non-smoker at least 100 times. And that's in hypnosis. And the reason for that was in order to make sure that I piled as much weight on that side of the belief as possible. But what I didn't have access to within hypnosis, and still don't, was the means to strip stuff out on the other side. And that's really why PSTEC Negative was designed, because I wanted a means to do something about the stuff that still sat there. Now, obviously, putting tools together like this is quite complex, because people process information in similar ways, but also they are different. We all work with people as therapists. We know how very different people are, but there are certain things that apply right across the board. If you pile a suggestion in and you keep repeating it, then it has more chance of sticking. At the same time, that stuff's still sitting there on the other side, so the means to remove it or reduce it, that is important, and that's really the whole crux of PSTEC Negative.
Yeah, you've already touched on this. Using PSTEC Negative, we remove the limiting beliefs. It's a belief eraser, and it's designed to allow, like you just said, to strip out that unwanted info and beliefs out of the subconscious altogether. Before we were piling PSTEC Positive just to tip it to the right, to the I can side, despite the heaviness on the left side, which in that metaphor, makes, there's a little work involved there, if you will, a little more effort, if you will. This, to me, not takes away, but it makes it easier so I don't have to apply quite as much effort on the right side. And it's taking off the weight from the left side, the I can't side, by erasing those beliefs. When it comes to emotions on the left side, you click track, like we've talked about in the beginning. Okay, you do that. Now, when it comes to beliefs, we can also remove those from the left side, making that teeter-totter there, that scale on the left side really, really light, meaning I don't have to exert as much effort and as much, like you said, mass on the right side to get this tipped in the direction I want it to go. True?
Yeah, this idea of a balance with weight or mass on either side is, I think, the simplest way to work with this and to consider it. But there's another important thing here, Jeff, which is that if you have a lot of stuff sat on the I can't side, the likelihood is that there isn't going to be very much on the I can side, and it would stay like that. Now, it also means that if there was a desire to plant something on the I can side, right, in order to shift that balance, without tools and without the means to bypass subconscious and conscious objections, the more that's sitting on the I can't side, it really gets in the way. So this is there's like two aspects to this. It's about making it easier to put mass on the I can side, because if you give a suggestion that you can do something, if there's less opposition on the I can't side, then it will be allocated more mass, if you like, by the subconscious when that suggestion is received, which means that whatever PSTEC Positive work you do, or affirmations, if somebody's doing it that way, will have more effect than it would do otherwise.
So, like you're saying, with PSTEC Positive, as you pile it on the right, so we're not negating positive. It's not an alternative, like I misspoke earlier. It's an additional tool that makes PSTEC Positive even more effective, is one way to look at it, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever somebody is given a suggestion or gives themselves a suggestion of change, that suggestion is being received, and it has to be processed and understood in the context of existing beliefs. If those beliefs are not at odds with it, it is far more likely to be expressed and to carry some weight. And that's why PSTEC Negative has value in this context, because you can reduce the amount of resistance.
Again, this just makes it easier for us to tip that scale to the right because you have less resistance. And I know a lot of people, I'll use that word resistance, quite often come to me and say, oh, I have this resistance, you know. This reduces the resistance. A little summary here, and we have some questions, and we're going to go over some other little defining things that will be really helpful to you. You can use PSTEC Negative, the belief eraser, on any beliefs which have caused your health problems, emotional problems, relationship problems, financial problems, all of it. You can use it on beliefs which have kept you stuck, on early programming from childhood, unwanted religious programming, beliefs which were drummed into you that you wish to eliminate, all those limiting beliefs. It's designed to let you erase all those beliefs and any others besides. Now, the best sequence for change. In the past, we basically, in a prescription mode, but it does vary, and there's an art to it sometimes, and everybody's a little bit different. But just as a starting point, it was generally, number one, address the emotions for an issue, and then follow up with PSTEC Positive on the beliefs. But now we're changing that sequence a little bit. Number one is use the PSTEC click tracks. And again, there are other tracks as well that can help, but let's just talk about the basic PSTEC click tracks. We use those to eliminate any strong negative emotions caused by the unwanted belief. And when you get those down to about 0, 1, then you can begin to follow up with step 2. Use PSTEC Negative, the belief eraser, to remove the old unwanted belief that's associated with that. And then step 3, follow up. And again, you don't have to do this, but I really recommend it highly. If you want to get this done and be done, I mean really done, and make it even more solid, in other words, tip that scale really heavy to the right, then use PSTEC Positive to suggest the belief about that which you wish to hold in the future, your desire, your goal, your target, however you want to look at it, your vision. So that's a little change in the sequence, if you will, of what we've talked about for, the last 5 years, right?
Yeah, and it's a really important change. Can I just touch on something that's I think is also important here, Jeff, which is that if somebody's using, they clear out the emotional side of things because it's the best way to do it, but also because when somebody is emotional about something, they literally process information differently. And that's really, really important to be aware of. And that's why it isn't a good idea just to use something like PSTEC Positive. It's because people do process information differently when they're emotional. And the example I almost always use is that of being in an argument, that I can, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. That kind of thing. It's very, very black and white. And when somebody's really fired up, doesn't matter what you say to them, they will those suggestions are going to bounce off and get nowhere. It's only when somebody cools down about something that they can see the subtlety. And so that's the primary reason why the click tracks would normally come first when it comes to changing anything. So if there's an emotional aspect to it, that's the place to begin, as a general rule. Right, the point I wanted to make about PSTEC Negative is that its purpose is to remove mass. Usually it's going to be on the I can't side, but it's going to be something negative. It might not be I can't, it might be I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm not as good as they are, whatever. It's about removing mass on that side. But if you think about that balance, if it's tipped over to the I can't side, and there's very little balanced on the positive side, the I can side, or, I have real value, and it's likely that there won't be much on there if there's a lot on the negative side, if you use the belief eraser on that negative side, you can strip nearly all of that out, but not necessarily feel that belief shift immediately, because you might still have more mass on the I can't side than the I can. But what you've done is you've stripped mass off that side, which means that even though there might not be a really dramatic shift in belief, although very often there will be, it doesn't mean it's not worked. Because you're working on these balances which are held within the subconscious mind, what you are doing is something which is completely out of sight. You only get a conscious awareness of that change when that balance tips. And I think that is a really, really important point to make. So if somebody doesn't notice anything dramatic, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not worked for them. They could repeat it if they want to and strip even more out, or they can just take it on trust. Yes, that does feel different. Now I can go in with PSTEC Positive, which is the third step. So in some cases, the difference will be dramatic. In some cases, it won't be. It depends what's there already.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it does vary. This is just a basic prescription, if you will, because there are some people I've started off with PSTEC Positive because their belief was so strong just simply about using PSTEC. But in general, this is a great prescription, and I love the added step number 2 I've seen in the short time that I've already used it with several people. Peter, you had mentioned a little bit about self-sabotage and disempowering core beliefs. Did you want to mention something about that here?
Yeah, I think one of the really powerful ways of applying the PSTEC click tracks is, as Tim says, write down a list of things that you wish had never happened in your life, whether that be bullying, whether you were bugged or, grief, big things like that. And often I found that if you get rid of the big emotions like that, often a lot of the disempowering thoughts and perceptions disappear. But I think you can do a similar thing with PSTEC negative on beliefs. Now, a lot of the time we're unaware of our core beliefs. It often requires a therapist using certain questioning techniques. But I've come across a free PDF, and I'm sure some of the listeners will be familiar with Katie Byron. But if you Google Katie Byron Universal Beliefs, there's a free PDF that you can download, and it lists lots of disempowering beliefs. And one of the key techniques I use in certain situations, I always ask almost every client if they like themselves, because lots of my clients hate themselves. I think it's just they attract heavy-duty cases where there's lots of self-hate. But if someone doesn't think that they hate themselves, but I have a hunch that they do, I will make them say out loud, I'm a good person, I am worthy. 50% of the time, when I have a hunch that I'm not so sure if that's completely true, the subconscious mind actually stops them from finishing the sentence. So your subconscious mind is communicating with you in a way to let you know that how it's perceiving things is different to your conscious mind.
True.
So an equivalent of using PSTEC negative in that way is to go through each of the universal beliefs in the free PDF, highlight particular ones that seem to gel with you, and just see if it is true for you. And if it is true for you, just undo it with PSTEC negative. And that's a good way of identifying core negative beliefs that you might not be aware of. And also, for each one, if you say the reverse of it, so like one of them says, I am not worthy, just say, I am worthy, or I deserve to be happy, and just see if there's any resistance to it subconsciously, and if there is, go through the PSTEC negative process. And if you do that, as well as the PSTEC emotional clearing on all past problems, it would have a huge effect. But I also just want to talk about a couple of other little things that have come across in my experimentation. A really good key question to ask. If, let's say, for example, I helped someone quite recently with a fear of heights. Now, normally that is a 10-minute job, done and dusted. Every so often you might have to use it a few times, but for this particular person, it just kept coming back. So I tried an accelerator. And then I asked him this question, is it safe to get rid of this emotion about this fear? And asking that question brought up the belief that he didn't realise he had, which is that if he gets rid of that fear, he will be in danger. So he uncovered a belief that it is dangerous to get rid of this fear of heights. So we scrutinised it at a conscious level, and he agreed with it consciously, and expected, once he had that understanding that knowledge of danger is enough, you don't need the actual corresponding fear, I would have expected that to be enough, but it still came back. So the click tracks were getting rid of the fear, but it was coming back afterwards. So we used PSTEC negative on the belief that, I have the belief that it is dangerous to remove this fear. I didn't use those words, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And we didn't need to do any further click tracks. The fear of heights just disappeared. And an even more striking example that I used recently, I'm going to be a bit vague on the exact scenario in this, but the principles are the same. Someone something bad had happened to someone, which resulted in them not being able to drink water. So they had a belief that it was poisonous and dangerous to drink water. Now, logically, they knew that that wasn't true. So in that situation, I put a glass of water in front of them and asked them to drink it, and click-tracked all the emotion that came up, the resistance. But it didn't touch it in the slightest. And I used an accelerator. And I think I'd just come across PSTEC negative then, and I used that on the belief that the water has poison in it. So bear in mind that this person knew that there wasn't poison in it, but subconsciously that belief was there. And again, we didn't need to use the click tracks after that. We used just that one PSTEC negative track, and then the person was able to drink water, and that was the problem gone.
Okay.
And with these recent examples, I'm close to saying that if I had to choose just 2 tracks out of the entire PSTEC family, it would be one EEF and PSTEC negative. That's how impressed I am with some of the clients that I've had recently.
Peter, can I just interrupt you there? Because what you've talked about is something really, really important. It's sort of, if I could just go back to what I was saying about people not necessarily feeling that shift, it doesn't mean nothing's happened. Which is that person held 2 beliefs. They had a subconscious belief and they held a conscious belief. One that water was safe and one that water was poison or not safe. Now, it illustrates perfectly what I was getting at before. That person, if they were to run PSTEC negative on something which changes something at a subconscious level, it doesn't necessarily change things for them at the conscious level because they're maintaining 2 completely different belief sets. So it's like actually getting your head around whether this is working can be a bit strange, but those are really, really good examples that illustrate exactly what's going on, even though consciously somebody already has a belief which is contradictory. And they're absolutely fascinating. I'm surprised that the difference was so marked between the belief about water being safe and water being dangerous, and that person not really being aware that there was this complete disparity. It's peculiar, but again, it's surprising, but it's not surprising. I mean, we come across all sorts of odd things, but it's just a wonderful example which sort of illustrates that somebody's not necessarily going to feel this working, but what is happening is the mechanics of the subconscious mind are at work while this process is being gone through, making changes. I'm going to let you come back in a moment, Peter, because I feel really guilty about this now.
Okay.
But one of the things that I think I can't remember who mentioned this, was a sort of like somebody described it as greasing the skids or greasing the wheels or something.
Yeah, grease the skids.
Yeah. Before PSTEC positive was used, and that sort of really illustrates exactly what the benefit is here. That yes, there may be it makes it easier, but sometimes it's not necessarily going to be easy to quantify exactly why, because these things are so deeply held and they're locked away outside of conscious awareness for the most part. But those uncovering techniques that you've just talked about, Peter, are absolutely brilliant, and the fact that it's also free, I think, is marvellous.
Another example, quite a profound pattern that I've noticed in the past 12 months, and this is for people who've had like a lifetime of pain, is that they're so used to being in pain and hurting that there's some kind of subconscious resistance to being happy because they know what to expect when they're not happy. And it's happened time and time again at school and with other people that they're actually sabotaging happiness in order to stay safe. And often by explaining that to a person, that's all that's required to understand that they're just trying to keep safe. But since I've had PSTEC negative, I've really cemented that idea. I've written out the belief. I have the belief that it is dangerous to be happy. And as soon as you undo that, that's another key removal of that saboteur at the core level. So to reiterate, what I would normally do, I wouldn't start off with this. I would use it when there's some resistance to the standard click tracks. So with hate, for example, I think there's 2 forms of it. Let's say someone hates himself because some things happened when they were younger that were quite bad, and they hated themselves, and they just felt that self-hate throughout their life. If they picture themselves and get rid of it with the click tracks, because that feeling has disappeared, they only believe that they hated themselves because of that feeling was there, and as soon as it's gone, it just collapses away. And that's kind of the normal thing that I would expect. But other people, they've got a very entrenched belief, which isn't just based on emotion. It's in those situations that you would need to use PSTEC negative. So that's if, you use the click tracks or accelerators to remove as much hate as possible, and then get the person to say, I deserve to be happy. Because if you hate yourself, you don't think you deserve to be happy. Then if the emotion comes back, your body will let you know and your subconscious mind will let you know. That tells you that you're working at a very strong, entrenched belief, which you need something like PSTEC negative to undo. That's something I've come across a lot in the past few months since having this technique.
This is why I refer clients to Peter, Jeff. Because he's just so brilliant. No, I'm saying I referred somebody to him today. It's just because he's so brilliant at doing these things.
Thank you.
Very nice. Some nice things. I appreciate all these extra tips as well. And so what we're going to do here is, if you have additional questions about PSTEC negative, you can go to the forum. There's a specific forum board for PSTEC negative. The link there is on the screen, or you can just go to PSTEC forum, that's PSTECFORUM.com, and go under the forum link, and you can see all the boards, and there's one regarding PSTEC negative, and you can find it on there. You can read anything on the forum without registering, so it's open to the public, but in order to post, you have to register. It doesn't cost you anything. Again, still free, but you can get in there and ask your own questions, and you can even be anonymous if you're really worried about that. So that's one place to go. The other place to go is in your package. It will either be added soon or it may already be there. There's a additional audio answering some of the common questions that have come up, recorded by Tim to answer those questions for you, so be sure to listen to that as well.
If somebody has literally, because it's only just been released at the time of recording this, if somebody's literally just got that package, that audio isn't going to be there. If there's some questions come in, then what I'll do is I will take a day out, record as many replies as possible, roll it up into an audio, and that will go to everybody who already has PSTEC negative.
And those in the future, it'll be included automatically. So
yeah.
All right. So on this page, the PSTEC negative, you just click on the buy button below. Depending when you view this video, there is an introductory price and some others, but when you click on it, you'll get whatever the current price is. Just click on that buy button. You can download it to your device, whatever that may be. There's a PDF user guide, and there's also 2 of the audio tracks of the PSTEC negative, and the manual will tell you all about how to use them. Again, you can go to the forum for questions, and then either it'll be added later or you'll see that in your package as a little Q&A audio as well. Thank you very much, Peter and Tim. Thanks for joining me on this and clarifying a lot for people. We put a lot in here. I wanted to at least give people an introduction not only to PSTEC negative, but a little review on PSTEC positive, the click tracks, the negative, or the emotions versus beliefs, and those kind of aspects. Any final word, Peter? Anything?
No, I can't recommend it highly enough. I think it's brilliant, PSTEC negative, and whether you're a self-helper or therapist, just try it out. It's such a brilliant extra tool to have. That's it, really.
I agree with you. I not only liked the concept when Tim told me about it, but when he actually started using it, it was like, okay, this is pretty cool. It makes my job easier when I'm working with other people. So much easier, so much more efficient, and I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was really tricky.
Any final words, Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to say it was really tricky to figure out, because it's. I was explaining to Peter, I think, in a phone conversation the other day, unsuggestion, basically. And the whole concept of unsuggestion has never really been explored to the best of my knowledge. It presented some real challenges. I think the most important thing is to use it in the way that's specified. If people have downloaded the package, do follow the instructions. Listen to the amazing advice that Peter talked about there. Follow the instructions, and as long as you do that, you'll get the best results.
All right. Once again, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Everybody listening, thank you. Go ahead and click on that to get started erasing those unwanted and negative beliefs. Be done with it. Go ahead and get that package. Take good care. Keep clicking. Aloha.